Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Olivine Raiders going up against the Petalburg Razors in our Season A2 preliminary final, where the winner of this match is going to move on to our Champions game to face the Petalburg Blazers. But it is the Olivine Raiders coming in their debut season, but they just lost to the Petalburg Blazers in our major semi-final that has left them here, and they do not want to go out in straight sets, whereas the Petalburg Razors have been running the gauntlet through victory road. So with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the metal decks? Will it be the colorless decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And starting off this match, it is going to be the Stark Mountain deck of the Olivine Raiders, moving their Heatran into the active spot. It's the Snorlax from the Bombardment deck of the Razors going into their active spot, both only placing down one basic Pokemon, but we can see the second Snorlax in hand for the Razors as the Rocky Helmet's pulled for the Raiders. They play the Pokeball and they're going to get the Skarmory with those metal arms that absolutely should be called metal wings, but they immediately move it onto the bench, and they already have a Lumberry in hand, which is fantastic for that Skarmory setup. As the Fan Rotom is pulled for the Petalburg Razors, they get a first energy onto the Snorlax. It does require 4 energy, but there is that Barry in hand that does reduce the attack cost by 2, as the Magnemite does get pulled for the Raiders here. They start setting up the Heatran, getting a first of 3 required energy onto it, but they quickly end their turn here as well, as both teams are setting up. It's the Apom being pulled for the Razors, and there is no Ambipom in hand just yet, but there are the 2 Lopunnies going along with that Snorlax that does get moved onto the bench, and they're playing the barrier onto the active Snorlax already. They want to try and get this Heatran off the board as quickly as possible, and with that collapse there's 100 damage done. Heatran still has 20 health remaining, but Snorlax is asleep. They will need to flip the heads. And they unfortunately flip the tails, but they still have time to get more energy onto the Snorlax. It is the potion being pulled by the Raiders, but they know that that potion isn't very useful if they want to keep Heatran away from that Snorlax collapse. Now that there is another coin flip, and it is another tails for the Razors, so that Snorlax is going to sit in place as the Professor's Research now getting pulled by the Razors. They do get to draw another 2 cards from their deck. They get the Giant Cape, they get the Ambipom as well, and the great thing about the Ambipom and Lopunnies in this deck is they only require 1 energy, as a 3rd energy is placed onto the Snorlax. 1 more energy, but it still needs to wake up as they're thinking about, and they are going to end their turn, and they flip the head, so Snorlax has awoken. It is going to come back to the Raiders. That Steel Tackle can do 110 damage as they pull their second potion as well. The Heatran with this Steel Tackle, though, it does do 20 damage to itself, and they're just going straight for it. That 20 damage, they clearly have rushed this decision because they have just dropped a point with Heatran going into the discard pile, as the Razors still have Snorlax in the active spot, so they move the Magnemite into the active spot through the Raiders as the Baneri is pulled by the Razors. Going between the Raiders and the Razors here. We're trying not to slip up our words. We apologize if we do, but the Baneri takes that final slot on the bench for the Razors, and another collapse, and the second point in game 1 for the Petalburg Razors here. Snorlax is asleep once again, but this is terrible for the Raiders. That crucial error, they had the potions ready to go. They could have kept Heatran around for at least another turn, as Snorlax will remain asleep. This is great for Skarmory. It can have that Lumberry placed onto it, as the second Heatran is pulled, immediately placed onto the bench, and here's the Lumberry being put onto the Skarmory in this game 1. Now you need all 3 decks to win in Victory Road so that your side will move on to that Champions game. The Metal Arms easily takes that Snorlax off the board, and the Raiders get their first point back. But it is the Ambipom moved into the active spot for the Petalburg Razors as they pull their second barrier. They could flip 2 heads here right now as they put the Giant Cape onto the Ambipom. For each heads with this double hit, it does 40 damage, and Skarmory only has 80 health. They're trying to take game 1 right here, right now with these coin flips. They do get a tails. That's great for the Raiders. They do get 1 heads, so this is an opportunity for the Razors to capitalize, because Skarmory can only do 50 damage to Ambipom, who has 110 health. It will take 3 turns to take it off the board. The second Magnemite being pulled immediately onto the bench. Heatran gets its first energy, and here is that first potion onto the Skarmory, taking its health up to 60, but they're going to play the second potion. They want to get it back to full strength here. And as we said, these Metal Arms, it does 50, but thanks to the Pokemon tool, it is able to do that 50. Otherwise, it would only be doing 20 damage to Ambipom. The Rocky Helmet pulled for the Razors, as well as they're starting to set up that second Snorlax. Another double hit, though, coming from Ambipom to try and end this game. They get 1 heads. They get 2, and just like that, the Bombardment deck is going to take game 1 in this preliminary final. But as we have our first board reset, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, make sure to leave a like, share, and more importantly, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the action in Season A2's Victory Road before we head on to Season A3 of the PokeType League TCG. But it is going to be that Stark Mountain deck again for the Olivine Raiders going first. They put the Heatran in the active spot with the Skarmory on the bench. The Razors this time playing their Hall of Origin deck, and they have got that Bidoof. They've also got the Porygon in hand. The Bidoof going in the active spot, the Porygon on the bench, and they have both their evolutions, both the Bibarel and the Porygon 2. But it is the start of game 2 here, as the Raiders, they ended up in this preliminary final after a clean sweep defeat in the major semi-final. The Razors have gotten here by running the gauntlet through Victory Road. They have not been able to lose a series. They did not come in with a second chance opportunity. As the Pokemon communication from the Raiders, they quickly in their turn sending it over to the Razors, who pull their second Porygon. They get a first energy onto the Bidoof, but it does require 2 energy, as the Professor's research is pulled by the Olivine Raiders. They get the Magneton, they get a Pokeball. This Pokeball will guarantee another basic Pokemon in hand. They probably want the Magnemite. Instead, they get their second Skarmory here, but they've got the Pokemon communication, so they are going to play that. They get the Sender Pokemon back into their deck, choosing the Heatran that is in hand. They'll get another Pokemon card out, and it's the Magnezone. Still no Magnemite, though. And it is a first energy onto the Heatran as they move the second Skarmory onto the bench, and the Adam's also in hand. We need to keep that in mind as the second Porygon 2 is pulled for the Petalburg Razors. Both Porygons now online, and so is that Bibarel, who does require 2 energy, just like the Bidoof. It can do 60 damage, halving the health of this Heatran. There is the potion in hand for the Raiders. They can use that to buy them a bit of time, as here is the Magnemite for the Raiders now. And they are looking at that potion. They are going to play that immediately as well, restoring 20 health for the Heatran. This will buy them a bit of time because Heatran still requires 3 energy. It requires another 2. It's already got 1 on it, but they need to keep in mind that Steel Tackle will do 20 recoil damage, so they're playing the Adam, and this will reduce the damage that all the metal Pokemon take by 20 in the next turn. And without much else they can do, they send it back over to the Razors, and already the Porygon Z is in hand for the Razors as well. They've got both Porygon 2s online. They get the Porygon Z online, and Porygon Z with that Buggy Beam can cause absolute chaos. We've seen it so many times this season. Another rolling tackle from the Bibarel, 40 damage this time, thanks to that Adamant onto the Heatran, as the Giant Cape is now pulled for the Olivine Raiders. The Raiders can get the Magneton online, and they do get the Giant Cape here onto the Heatran, which is a very, very questionable choice. So we'll be seeing how they try to approach this here. We know that Heatran can do 110 damage to the Bibarel. They will take it off the board. They almost put an energy onto the Magneton, but they realized they could have made a crucial error. The Steel Tackle, and Bibarel is in the discard pile. The Olivine Raiders with this Stark Mountain deck have taken the first point here in Game 2. The Razors thinking, do they want the Porygon Z or do they want the Porygon 2 in the active spot? It's the Porygon Z that they're going with, knowing that the Porygon 2 cannot outlast a hit from the Heatran. They get a second energy though onto the Porygon Z. It has 140 health, but it still requires a third energy itself for this Buggy Beam to do 80 damage, and they are going to end their turn. Now they have got that Pokemon Center Lady in hand, as the Raiders once again getting that Heatran out of the deck. The Magnezone is online, and the active Heatran, 110 damage from this Steel Tackle, another 20 recoil damage, but Porygon Z now has only 30 health remaining as the Regigigas is pulled from this Hall of Origin deck, and there is Porygon Z getting its third energy. The Pokemon Center Lady is played to bring its health back up to 60, but 80 damage. But the most crucial part is they do get their first point here in Game 2, is now they're going to generate a darkness energy for the Olivine Raiders in the next turn, and all of their Pokemon still require at least one metal energy. Magnezone requiring a metal, and it can get a colorless energy, so it can get any energy of any type, but it still needs one metal, as does the Skarmory, who has 80 health. They have pulled the Rocky Helmet though, and they think of putting this onto the Skarmory. They're trying to get that 20 recoil damage because Skarmory cannot capitalize and do 50 damage to the Porygon Z. They get that darkness energy onto the Magnezone, and they do end their turn. And the Razors pulling their Dawn are going to get the Regigigas online as they get a first energy onto the Porygon 2, but another Buggy Beam, and it will be another point for this Hall of Origin deck as they have quickly turned this game 2 around, trying to take control over the Olivine Raiders. This is not what they wanted coming into their debut Victory Road. They came in that top spot on the leaderboard, but they lost their first game in Victory Road. They do not want to lose their second. The Razors, desperate to run the gauntlet. They want redemption after taking the Wooden Crown last season. It is a second Darkness Energy now onto the Magnezone as they do get that Lumberry onto the Skarmory, trying to capitalize on that Pokemon Tool effect on the Metal Arms. They do end their turn, sending it back over to the Razors, who do pull the Pokeball. They are going to play that immediately, and they are going to get that second Bidoof out of their deck. They've got the second Bibarel. I will one day eventually figure out how to say that. Somebody correct me in the comments. As the Buggy Beam continues from the Porygon Z, bringing Magnezone down to only 60 health, and it is now a Water type energy for the Raiders as they pull their second Magneton. And there is nothing they can do, and they must be realizing this here. They do end their turn, and the Razors are running rampant here in this preliminary final because this Buggy Beam, they don't care about pulling the Arceus, they care about getting this Hall of Origin deck over the line. They only need one more deck to take a win, and they will secure their spot in the Champions game against the Cinnabar Blazers as we have another table reset. But this is game 3, and it is going to be the Razors going first. They only need this Fast Days deck to win, and this time they're going up against the Eternal Time deck of the Raiders. It is the Cyclozar in the active spot. They've got the Jigglypuff on the bench along with the Starly. They've got a second Jigglypuff in hand, but they've got that Wigglytuff as well with the comforting song. It's the Bronzor for the Raiders in the active spot. They've got the Shieldons, but they still need the Armor Fossils as the Staraptor has been pulled for the Petalburg Razors as well, and they quickly end their turn. There's not much else they can do as there is the Professor's Research in hand for the Raiders. They've got both of them, but they also play that Pokeball. They get the second Bronzor. They don't want to lose by only having one Pokemon on the board, so they do play that Professor's Research. They get the Bastiodon as well, and the Adamant, the Bronzor on the bench, and they get a first energy onto the active Bronzor that does require 2 energy for that tackle that does 30 damage. The benched Bronzor does only need 1 energy, but for that Ram. As the second Starly is pulled, it is the Wigglytuff coming online, and with the Cyclozar, it gets its 1 energy for this over acceleration. Does 20 damage, but in every consecutive turn it actually does 40 damage in total. As the Iono does get pulled for the Olivine Raiders, their hand is starting to fill up quite quickly here. They still want the Armor Fossil. They do get a second energy onto the Bronzor, and they're going to play the Adamant. They're not going to play the Professor's Research because they can only use 1 Pokemon supporter per turn. They get the Tackle, 30 damage onto the Cyclozar. Now they definitely want to pull a Bronzong in the next turn because they do require 3 energy. And the Razors, they do pull the Chatot, but they play that comforting song from Wigglytuff to restore 20 health from the Cyclozar, and another over acceleration, 40 damage is only becoming 20 thanks to that Adamant onto the Bronzor, buying the Raiders another turn. They get the Armor Fossil, so they've got the entire Bastiodon line in hand, but first they're going to play that Professor's Research, get another 2 cards. They get the Rocky Helmet, they get the Dialga, no Bronzong in sight, but they do get that Rocky Helmet onto the Bronzor. They want that recoil damage. They want the Cyclozar reluctant to do damage as the Armor Fossil coming online, getting that first energy, and they're thinking of placing down, and they do, taking that last bench spot for the Origin form Dialga. Another 30 damage onto the Cyclozar from the Bronzor, as the Staravia is also pulled for the Petalburg Razors, and that Wigglytuff will be able to restore another 20 health for the Cyclozar, but they're not worried about that. They just go with the over acceleration to quickly take that Bronzor off the board, getting the first point here in game 3. It's surprising that they didn't go for that comforting song though. There's only 20 health remaining for the Cyclozar. Now the Raiders thinking about what they want to do. They're actually going to move their Bronzor into the active spot. Now they have just pulled their second armor fossil. They are going to get the Shieldon online, and that Shieldon could have taken the Cyclizar off the board, but they're clearly worried that there is a Staraptor, and there is a Staraptor in hand for the Petalburg Razors. They get a second energy onto the Shieldon. There's that second Wigglytuff, so they immediately get the Jigglypuff onto that final bench spot to the Razors, and there it is, the Brave Bird Staraptor. It is going to get its third energy, it looks like. Or they're maybe setting up the Wigglytuff, knowing that they can buy themselves a bit of time. They're going with the Comforting Song once again for the Cyclizar, but that's the Staraptor, 130 damage. It does do 20 recoil damage to itself, but there's another 40 onto the active Bronzor from the Cyclizar as it comes back over to the Raiders. Now they're pulling the Bronzong, but this could actually buy them a bit of setup time here in this contest, knowing that the Bastiodon with that guarded grill can take 100 less damage when they flip heads when it is on the receiving end of attacks. And they get that Shieldon online as well, getting a first energy onto it. Comes back over to the Petalburg Razors. They get the Rocky Helmet, but here it is, that second Wigglytuff coming online. They can restore 20 health with each Comforting Song from the active Pokemon. There's the third energy onto the Staraptor as well. Here's that Comforting Song, first restoring Cyclizar up to 60 health, and they can once again another Comforting Song, restoring Cyclizar up to full strength. This could be the last game for the Olivine Raiders. They need to play this very smart, but the Razors don't want to have to lose this. It was actually a contest between these two decks, the Eternal Time and Fast Days deck that we did see the last time these two sides met, and it was the Razors who unfortunately were not successful in taking down the Bastiodon, as the second Bronzong does get pulled for the Olivine Raiders. They've actually kept the Cyclizar in the active spot. This does buy the Raiders another turn to set up here. And they see how many cards they have left in their deck. It looked like it was 4, but it is the Razors pulling the Pokeball. Now they're going to play that immediately, thinning their deck quicker and quicker to the second Chatot being pulled from this deck. And they get a first energy, onto the second Wigglytuff. The over-acceleration continues, and it will take this second Bronzong off the board. One more point for the Petalburg Razors, and they are moving on to our Champions game. The Raiders need to take the next 3 points, and they need to take the next 3 games to win this series. But it is the Bastiodon moved into the active spot, and they immediately get the Giant Cape that they pulled onto it, boosting its health up to 180. Keeping in mind, it can take 100 less damage if it flips heads, but it can do 80 damage with this headbang, so it wipes that Cyclizar off the board, moving it into the discoupler. Does take 20 damage thanks to that Rocky Helmet, does Bastiodon, but the Raiders get their first point here in game 3 as they are trying to keep this series and their victory road and champion hopes alive. It is the Staraptor though moved into the active spot as the second Staravia is pulled for the Petalburg Razors. They get a 4th energy onto the Staraptor as well, and with the coin flip, the Raiders flip heads, so it's only going to be 30 damage from the Brave Bird, 20 recoil damage onto the Staraptor. This is exactly what the Raiders need. They need Bastiodon to be able to tank these hits and win this matchup to take it to a game 4. They get a first energy onto the Dialga, another headbang, 80 damage onto the Staraptor. Seeing that they've now only got 2 cards remaining in their deck, the Razors pulling their second Staraptor, so they're going to start setting up the Starly here, moving that onto the bench, getting a first energy onto it here as well. And here is the Comforting Song from that first Wigglytuff, boosting Staraptor back up to 70 health. They play that second Comforting Song, keeping in mind the Staraptor that's in hand does a clutch instead of a Brave Bird that does 80 damage, but it prevents the active Pokemon from being able to retreat. They're going for another Brave Bird, and it's another heads for this Eternal Time deck, so only 30 damage once again onto the Bastiodon, 20 recoil onto the Staraptor, and now Staraptor only has 70 health remaining as the second Bastiodon is pulled for the Raiders. The benched Bastiodon has 2 energy, so does Dialga. They both only require 3, and another headbang from this active Bastiodon, and the Brave Bird Staraptor is wiped off the board. 1 more point for the Raiders, and they will take this to a game 4 as they are turning this game 3 around. It's the Wigglytuff though, moved into the active spot. Now it does have 100 health, the X speed being pulled for the Razors here. They get the Staravia online, they get a second energy onto the Wigglytuff, and with this gentle slap, it's the tails flipped by the Raiders. They're going to get the full 50 damage, a very gentle slap indeed, bringing Bastiodon down to only 50 health remaining. The Raiders now need to think about how they want to approach this, because Bastiodon does have a 4 energy retreat cost, but they do have that X speed in hand. But no, they're going to keep Bastiodon in the active spot. They're willing to play that risk, because this could be a crucial error. They do bring Wigglytuff down to only 20 health. It is the Barry being pulled for the Petalburg Razors. And they could have actually moved that Dialga into the active spot with that Time Mash. It does 100 damage. They could have won game 4 right here. They're going with these Confidence Songs to restore the health of the Wigglytuff. And this is massive. That could be a huge error for the Raiders, but they need to flip ahead when the time comes. But it's the Staravia coming into the active spot. They evolve it into the Staraptor, and they are going to play the Barrier to bring down the attack cost. So this clutch, they can go for it now. And is this going to be a clutch coin flip? It's a tails. The Raiders have lost. It is a clean sweep. 2 games in a row. The Raiders are unable to win a single game in either of their 2 matchups here in Victory Road. They have been eliminated. They have become our 3rd member of the Elite 4. But it's the Razors that are going on to our Champions game to face the Cinnabar Blazers. But with that said, Nidorinas, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was. And if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.